In today's show, we're talking scouting reports for Duke's AJ Griffin and LSU's Tari Eason. Is Griffin the pick at 7? Is Eason a trade back target? 2 long wings that could help the Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Why don't you make this podcast your first listen every single day, 5 days a week, available on all your platforms. Have something to talk about with your pals leading into the draft. So start your day, make it your first listen, and then tell your friends to do the same. Today's show, we're talking draft prospects. We're going to do scouting reports on 2 guys who worked out for the Trailblazers last week. This happened on Thursday and Friday of last week, but we had a couple interviews last week that were a ton of fun. John Ross, former video coordinator of the Portland Trailblazers, joined the program, and then Kristen Peak of Yahoo Sports, NBA draft analyst, joined the program. So we didn't get to dive into the specifics, although we talked about each of these gentlemen a little bit. We didn't get to dive into the specifics of 2 guys who worked out for the Trailblazers, AJ Griffin of Duke and Tari Eason of the Louisiana State Tigers. Go Tigers. So that's what we're going to do in today's episode. I want to talk who they are, what their draft range is, their strengths and their weaknesses, and sort of a fit and role and how, where and why they might fit with the Portland Trail Blazers. Let's get to know who these 2 gentlemen are, though. AJ Griffin came to Portland June 9th last week. That's last Thursday. He had a solo workout. He's been doing solo workouts. He went from Portland to Indiana, the pick right before the Blazers. The Pacers are 6th. Griffin is going all around in that sort of outside of the top 5 lottery or 5 to 10 lottery and working out for every team. He also worked out for the Knicks. It's who are at 11. He is flying to all of those places and doing what you do. And typically almost all of those places have been solo workouts. He also was involved in the CAA agent workout in LA, which every team in the NBA basically attended. He's gotten himself in front of folks. And the reason that people want to see Duke's AJ Griffin is because he's the size and skill set that is highly coveted in the league. He's 6'6", didn't do measurements at the NBA Combine, but I've seen it reported a couple places that he has a 7-foot wingspan. I'll tell you what, I've seen him play a bunch. He has long arms. I don't know how long they are, but he does indeed have long arms. In one season at Duke, he averaged 10.4 points, 3.9 rebounds, 1.0 assists, half a steal, and a little more than half a block. Shot 49% from the floor and 44.7% from three-point range. That's the big one, on over 4 attempts per game, 79.2% from the free throw line. The real story of AJ Griffin is that he's had some lower body injuries. As a junior, January of his junior year, he dislocated his left kneecap in January. Just kind of from what I read, landed weird, came down and had to, dislocated his kneecap. A scary injury, to be sure. Nobody wants to have that happen to him. But that was January of 2020, and it was reported that he might have actually been able to return towards the end of his junior season, but that was the year that COVID came into our lives, and so there was no basketball season for him to come back to his junior year. And then senior year, we're still in we didn't get out of it. Well, we're still here. So he had an ankle injury his senior year, and he was living with his father in Florida, and it was traveling back from where he was living to rejoin his private high school was going to have some COVID complications. He was already like a top 15 recruit. He was going to choose between going to basically Villanova and Duke, 2 of the best programs in the country. So he didn't need high school basketball anymore. So well, he didn't really play his senior year in the high school basketball his senior year. It seems like, just reading between the lines, maybe he realized that it was, he was months away from playing in the NBA, and you might as well just train and work on your skill stuff. His father is a former NBA player. He's got pretty good help at home, as he's Adrian Griffin Jr., for those of you who remember the sort of 90s Hoopers. Many of you will. But then at Duke, AJ Griffin, his went to training camp at Duke, he also sprained his knee, and he was supposedly going to miss about a month. He basically missed all of camp, but didn't miss any games. Basically the big impact of that was that he came off the bench early in his college career. Like he didn't. Duke had kind of a logjam with Wendell Moore and Trevor Keels and Paolo Banchero, frankly, at Griffin's spot. So he was just, because he missed some time early, was a little bit behind those guys. And early in the season, he played lightly in some games against Ohio State and Gonzaga, which he may have had big minutes in. But regardless, a 44% shooter on 4 attempts per game. He's 6'7", like 220. Like he's an NBA-sized wing. That was June 9th, solo workout. AJ Griffin gets in there and shoots his wide stance three-pointers, and the Blazers can watch him get some shots up. The next day, there was a group workout headlined by LSU's Tari Eason. Eason worked out with... He was one of 5 guys in the workout. JD Notsai from Arkansas, point guard from the Razorbacks program. Kenny Lofton Jr., who I am stunned to learn is not Kenny Lofton's son. His dad is Kenny Lofton, but not the baseball player. That was a absolute shocker to me in preparing for this podcast, that Kenny Lofton Jr. is the son of a different Kenny Lofton. Who knew? That's big guy. Kenny Lofton's like a big 6'7" kind of outside shooter, interesting type. He went to Louisiana Tech. Evan Beatty from Colorado, a forward from Colorado. Tyson Etienne from Wichita State, a point guard to match up with Notai. And Noah Kirkwood, a wing from Harvard. But the big name there, all those guys are like second round hopefuls, and Eason, who's going to go in the mid-first round at some point. Like, Eason is the name to know, and the reason you need to know him is because he's a 6'8" forward with a 7'2" wingspan. He spent 2 years at LSU, and his second season at LSU came off the bench. Only 4 starts, 33 games at LSU, came off the bench. Was their leading scorer despite coming off the bench, having 16.9 points, 6.6 rebounds, an assist, 1.9 steals, and 1.1 blocks. Shot 52% from the floor, 35.9% from 3, and 80% from the free throw line. A dude whose highlight package, where AJ Griffin's is like, oh man, that's a sweet shooting stroke, even if he has kind of a weird mechanics. Like, Tari Eason's highlights jump off the page. It's like, oh, dunk, swooping layup, rebound putback, and 1 foul. He has, highlights are not all of scouting, but a more exciting highlight package. Definitely someone I was excited about. Those are the two names you need to know. That's AJ Griffin of Duke, a 2-3-4 type, like a true NBA wing, and Eason, who projects as like a forward defensive role player. I want to talk about their strengths and their weaknesses in the second segment, but before we do that, I want to tell you about some real exciting news. NBA Jam is back, and you can bring it into your home. Arcade 1UP, the leader in home retro arcade gaming, is not only bringing back one of the great games of all times, they've made it bigger and better than ever with the Shaq Edition machine. Listen, this is a chance to get a NBA Jam console in your home and a new special edition version of the game, like straight up playing the arcade, but in your house. If you're like me, you loved NBA Jam and continue to love NBA Jam into your adulthood. If you don't know about NBA Jam, this would be a really fun way to get into it. It is the first NBA licensed game. It was the revolution in NBA gaming. The just 2-on-2, no fouls, no goaltending, as fun as it possibly gets. You can bring that into your home. You can pre-order right now. If you go to arcade1up.com, that's arcade1up.com, estimated early September ship date. Arcade 1UP is the place for fun. They've got even more classics. If you don't want to play NBA Jam, what about Golden Tee, Mortal Kombat, and so many others? They start at just $399. But check this out. They're giving away an NBA Jam Shaq Edition to a Locked On listener. That could be you, because if you're listening, you're a Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win a console for your home at arcade1up.com/lockedon. That's arcade1up.com/lockedon. You've got until July 8th to enter to win an NBA Jam Shaq Edition console. Don't miss out. Enter today and figure out who you're going to play with, because it's going to be tons of fun. All right, let's talk about some strengths and weaknesses. AJ Griffin is a shooter, one of the best pure shooters in this draft class. he's got the skills that you want in an NBA wing. Like he's 6'7". He was shooting above 50% from three into ACC play. Like in January, he was red hot. He was shooting 47%. The first round of you play everyone in conference twice. Through the first round of ACC play, AJ Griffin was shooting 47% from three on 4 attempts per game. He's making 2 a night, easy money, 2 a night, and he could have got more up. There just wasn't. Duke had kind of a mouse to feed problem, and he didn't have the opportunity that he might have had somewhere else with a team that didn't have a true point guard and ran a lot of offense through Paolo Banchero. He can shoot. That's his strength. And he has the right frame to be a 3 or potentially a small 4 eventually because he's big with long arms. Like he could, increasingly strength and long arms can allow you to get away with playing 4 if you can rebound a little bit, although some teams are just going to be bigger than you. But I think AJ Griffin could play 2, 3, and 4 in the league. But a shooter with an NBA frame, that's exciting. At 19 years old. The most of the sort of draft range for Griffin have seen him as high as 5. He's not really creeping up into the top 4, but as high as 5 right there. If Detroit or Sacramento does something funky and he ends up there, and as low as like 11. He's going to go somewhere very likely in the top 10. He'll be the second Duke guy off the board unless something really bizarre happens with Paolo Banchero. I was early in the season, I was a big time believer in AJ Griffin as like a long-term NBA player, and I don't think that has changed. But I would say down the stretch of the ACC tournament and into the NCAA tournament, I don't watch a ton of college basketball, but I watch Duke a ton. I've seen AJ Griffin play a ton of games. So this I feel more confident than in, say, maybe some other scouting, like Eason, who I saw play 1 total game in college. I feel confident in my scout of AJ Griffin is that he just didn't have a lot. He didn't run a lot of pick and roll, like sort of on-ball juice stuff that you want to see a guy have like some secondary playmaking skills in the league. Shoot a lot of standstill shooting and even his drives to the rim. Like he has this frame and you think like some strength to get himself to the cup. It's pretty mechanical with him. Pump fake, get him up, get your guy up in the air, take 2 dribbles, sidestep, little scoop floater. Like he doesn't have a lot of that. It's like explosive, really impressive moves. He has some times where he slows down and uses his strength to decelerate. That's a real skill in the league and can translate. And I think he can develop into some on-ball creation stuff. He just didn't do much. He doesn't have a lot of reps, so you really just don't know. And I don't think he's much of a passer. It's hard to know because I think like the guy you would pass it to on Duke would be AJ Griffin, and he had a couple kickouts occasionally to Banchero where it was like, okay, these dudes can play, but I don't think, I just didn't see it a bunch, like on-ball creation stuff, either for his own shot or for other people's shot. Like I think he's strong enough and has a frame enough to be a guy who can drive to the rim, but if he can't, he's an incredibly gifted shooter, and that, along with his size, will really that's his upside there. The weaknesses are that maybe the injury stuff, maybe a kneecap and then a sprained knee and also an ankle injury that may be a little overblown, but a variety of lower body injuries may have zapped some of his athleticism that made him this Team USA phenom as a 17-year-old. He's like I said, he doesn't have the crazy highlights. I think he can get there, and I think some of it is just like playing for Duke. He was not going to be that guy at Duke, that stuff was going to run through him because of just the nature of their team. They had 5 NBA players in the roster. He wasn't going to get like that high level usage stuff where you get to see, okay, let's see Griffin attack again. They ran most of that through Banchero, and otherwise, late in the year they had to put Jeremy Roach on the court and have a point guard out there. I think the question with Griffin is not really offense, but it's, does the athleticism impact his defense and his foot speed enough that he can't really guard 2s and 3s and he has to guard 4s? That's the question. And then it's like he's an undersized 4 and doesn't have the lateral movement to guard on the wing, and then he's like a 3-and-D player with questionable defense. He's a 3 and something else type of contributor. I think that's the concern. But for me, he has the frame to be an NBA wing. Like if you would ask me in January, really excited about him. You asked me in June, I'm a little more skeptical, but I still think long-term NBA player. Eason on the other side is kind of like The reverse of Griffin, if Griffin is like in some ways dependable because he has that one NBA skill, Eason is like hopeful because he just plays with a lot of juice. Like he just plays really hard. All the scouting reports mention he's a really good defender, a really good off-ball defender, really good on-ball defender. The numbers, like per minute numbers, advanced numbers, check out him as a really, really impactful defensive player. But I think that chaos worries people. The scouting reports I've read from The Ringer and from ESPN, as well as on The Athletic from Sam Vecini, over at NBA Big Board with Raphael, my friend Raphael Barlow. Like it's the concern with Eason is that he's chaotic. His strength in college, just driving to the rim and being, a force in the half court, is maybe not something you can get away with. And maybe he played small ball center a little bit, and at LSU, the one game I watched, he straight up played center off the bench, and point guard. It was really fun. But he he has a pretty heavy foul rate, and maybe if he isn't the rim protector, his foul rate will go down a little bit. So I think for him, it's the decision making and just his general chaos. Does that translate to being an effective half court player? He's shot almost 36% from three. He can handle at his size. He can pass a little bit at his size. He projects as a pretty aggressive defender. Who knows? The chaos stuff, if he's can be a good team concept defender, or if he's just kind of a high energy, pest, as opposed to this elite help defense, elite sort of team, like I said, team concept defender. But if he's got some tools to be intriguing, he was a guy who was listed up in the top 10 picks early on in this process, and he has slid dramatically. I have not seen mock drafts where he is much higher than 12, and recently, I have seen mocks where he slips into the 20s, and including a recent one released today by Gary Parrish of CBS, he has Tari Eason falling all the way down to 23. So he's someone who's for sure slipping. There's been some whispers that he's had some bad workouts. To me, sometimes bad workouts means I'm a team at 16. Please tell anyone that will listen that Tari Eason's bad and you don't want to draft him in those first 15 picks. I'd be wary of the quote bad workouts, but multiple people have kind of mentioned that he's had some bad, hasn't done well in the interview section. I always find that stuff to be, well, let's just put that in your back pockets. Know that that's kind of the whispers that are out there on Eason right now, and we'll see what happens. When I had Richard from Mavs Draft on here, he said that his intel had heard that Eason had some bad workouts, specifically with the Oklahoma City Thunder. I would say that Sam Presti going off board, leaking some, or his people leaking some sort of negative intel on Eason and then drafting him 12th or whatever, totally in play for OKC. Certainly could happen. So let's talk about, to close the show, whether either of these gentlemen would be fits on the Blazers and where exactly would they fit. But first, let's talk about RockAuto.com. The family business, specializing in helping do-it-yourselfers work on your automobile for 2 decades, 20 years of experience helping you save time and money, real money, 30, 50, even 100% more. Less than if you go to a chain auto parts store or the car dealership. You're going to spend more time there. They're not going to have the parts you need because they just physically can't carry everything for every make and model. And you're just going to spend more cash after you've wasted your time. If you go to Rock Auto, you avoid the hassle of do they have it, because you can quickly scroll through their easy-to-use website and find out what they've got for whatever make and model you are whipping these days. And like I said, you're going to save some cash because they're cheaper than going to a chain auto parts store or going to a car dealership. So why don't you go check out all the parts available for your car or truck on their website, rockauto.com. And while you're there, write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box. That way they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Let's talk about Eason and Griffin and their fits with the Trailblazers. Griffin, if the biggest concern you hear from draft people are the medicals. If his knees and legs check out, then he is like exactly what teams want. And so let's assume, because I don't know about, how could I possibly, I'm a podcaster, not a physician. If I was a physician, I certainly don't have access to anyone's medical history. I know what I know. He, junior year, he dislocated his left kneecap. Senior, he had an ankle injury, but maybe just skipped it because he didn't need to play any more high school basketball. And then he got hurt at Duke early, like in training camp. He didn't miss any games at Duke. He kind of missed out on having a bigger role, but he was shooting 50% from three in January. Like, he was rolling when he played. And some of it was just like roster stuff. How do you get Trevor Keels and one or more on the court? Like, Duke had that issue, and Griffin got crunched because of that issue, and probably because of the injury stuff too. If he's healthy, I think he's close to an ideal wing, and I would be very, very comfortable with the Blazers taking him at 7. I know where he went to college. Go Tar Heels. Straight up. I got no love for Duke, but I would be very comfortable with the Blazers taking him at 7. I think he'll be a long-term NBA player. He might not have the upside of a guy like Shaedon Sharpe or Dyson Daniels, or someone you say, okay, he could really develop into something. He's not 18 years old like Jalen Duren, who you're like, okay, this is like, I don't mean to suggest that AJ Griffin is a finished product by any means, but I think he's closer to what he's going to be. And yet he's still probably not a day one contributor. So he's like not quite like he could play in the NBA, but like as on a good team, is he a day one contributor? I don't think so right away. In general, most rookies aren't, so it's a safe bet. But I think he could be a contributor in his rookie year. I think he has a skill set that can help you play in the league early on. The right size and shooting ability. If you make the threes, they can figure out where to fit you on the other end. If the only thing you can do is shoot, it's the best thing to only be good at. Shooting is the best. If you're going to have one skill, shooting is the best skill to quote unquote only be good at. I would be comfortable with the Blazers taking him at 7. I think he's that good. He's not my choice. I would pick here's my big board. I would take Ben Mathurin over him. I would take, if Keegan Murray, I would take him if he was there over him. But Griffin would be, Dyson Daniels probably would take over Griffin, but not super confidently. I don't think I've made my mind up there. But like Griffin will be right in the range. If he's there at 7, really worth considering, because the Blazers need wings. They need shooting. They need like defensive potential, and a 6'6" with long arms at, a 215, somewhere between 210 and 220. Like, that's an NBA-sized wing, and an NBA-sized wing is like, that's the position literally every team needs, and specifically the Blazers need. I would have no problem with Griffin at 7. Tari Eason's not a pick at 7. It's not a pick at 7. But if the Blazers trade back, depending on where they trade back, like, if they swap with your Atlanta Hawks, as a trade we'll talk about a little bit later on this week, if they happen to trade back with the Atlanta Hawks, or if they trade back with, say, the Rockets at 17 or whatever it might be, in the teens, I would take a long and serious look at Eason, because the defensive ability and the playmaking skills, like ball skills and defensive acumen, are what you want off the bench. I don't know if Tari Eason is like a long-term NBA starter. I'm pretty confident that AJ Griffin's a long-term NBA starter. But for me, what Tari Eason is a role player who is the exact size that every team needs more 6'8" athletes who can shoot a little bit, pass a little bit, and play hard as hell on defense. That's every team needs more dudes like that off the bench. Even teams chock full of them. You know what the Clippers do? They have a whole roster full of those sized gentlemen. Like, they have got Reggie Jackson and then a bunch of 6'8" dudes who can handle and shoot. Like, that's the plan. If that team's healthy, they're going to be title favorites. That's how this works. Like, it's the size you need. I think Eason's sort of lack of maybe half-court impact and maybe his sort of like a general chaos as a defensive player make you think like, oh, there's just a wider range of outcomes. But 17-7 with 2 steals and a block in the SEC, like, his size and skills and versatility, I think, are really intriguing. I think if he's there and you're on the board at 15 and back, if the Blazers trade back, again, not at 7, but the Blazers trade back, I'd be really comfortable with Tari Eason as well. I'd also be really comfortable with Kenneth Lofton Jr., because I would love to tell him that I thought his dad, like I'm sure millions of people have, thought his dad was former Cleveland and Atlanta baseball player, University of Arizona standout Kenny Lofton, Steve Kerr's teammate at U of A. How am I supposed to know that? I'm prepping for the draft. I'm learning that Kenny Lofton's dad is another Kenny Lofton. And I'm learning that I think Tari Eason's a pretty good pick in the teens, and that AJ Griffin is, I am totally comfortable with AJ Griffin at 7. Later this week, we got more fun for you. We're going to talk a little bit of trade speculation stuff, OG Anunoby and John Collins. Make sure you're back for that. Blazers are going to have a couple more draft workouts, according to Casey Holdall of Blazers.com. So we'll talk about who else the Blazers work out. We are in the home stretch, 10 days away as you are listening to this from the NBA draft. This is going to be the last week of workouts. The last guys the Blazers bring in, we will talk about who they bring in. We'll kind of look back at all of the folks they brought in and talk about what they might be doing. We're going to round up the latest rumors. We'll look at the latest mock drafts. We're going to have a ton of fun. So come back. Make this your first listen every day. Tell your friends to do the same. Look for us wherever you get podcasts. Also on YouTube, 5 days a week. Appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.